News 2 presents To the Point.
Our first point today, a South Carolina congressman is under fire for his connections to the January 6th riots. Coming up, we break down what the future could hold for Representative Ralph Norman. Second point, we're just weeks away from the state of South Carolina's legislative session. We have two state lawmakers here in studio, one a veteran, one a newcomer. And later, a new Charleston County councilman is joining us in studio to talk about his priorities going into the new year. Good Sunday morning. Welcome to the Point. This is the show where we break down the political issues and elections that matter to you. I'm Riley Benson. Local political leaders are calling for the immediate resignation of South Carolina Congressman. This comes after the release of text showing Congressman Ralph Norman in communication with former White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows in January of 2021. The message is exclusively obtained by Talking Points memo, includes Norman calling for then President Donald Trump to invoke martial law to prevent President Biden from moving into the Oval Office. The York County Democratic Party calls Norman, quote, a domestic enemy of the United States Constitution. They want other GOP leaders to condemn his remarks. John Bersini joining us now. John, thank you so much again for, of course, being on the show every week. John, we're talking about Congressman Ralph Norman and these text messages he sent to Mark Meadows. And so, a number of people now calling for his resignation. What does this mean for not only Congressman Norman, but, South Carolina and our country?
Well, certainly it doesn't look good right now for Congressman Norman. Anytime anyone calls for your resignation and they've got a bona fide reason behind that, you sort of makes you stop and scratch your head. We've never seen these type of events unfold. January 6th in and of itself was unprecedented, and the more it seems like we unpack from that day, the more we're finding out that's disturbing.
So obviously a lot of up in the air at this point. So what are the likelihoods that you could see the congressman resign? Does he survive this? Kind of what does the future really look like for Congressman Norman?
Well, for the congressman, probably a lot of this is going to depend on who calls for his resignation. You and I both know that if you can sort of beat the media cycle and let the media move on to this next story, and you're still there, you stand a pretty decent chance of remaining there. If it really starts to ramp up and you get some very senior members of the Republican Party, for example, that are telling him, you want to know what, this is a bridge too far, we need to rethink this, you need to go, that certainly I think would change his perspective.
On the flip side, we've talked about it heavily on this show, is former President Donald Trump has announced that he's running. So where does this play into his bid for president? Again, does this hurt him? Does this help him? And does that kind of attach itself to Congressman Norman?
So for the Trump base, again, this isn't going to matter. Again, they're behind him 100%. I don't think anything really could sway their mind. For some of the undecideds, though, this is continual fuel for the fire, right, and additional cause for concern. It'll be interesting to see how this really plays out.
John, any final thoughts on this issue with Congressman Norman?
Well, stay tuned. This probably isn't over quite yet. It'll be interesting to see how this develops. And again, it's hard to believe we're already talking about the 2024 presidential election.
John, something we're going to watch here on To the Point. Now, we're just weeks away from the beginning of the 2023 legislative session in the State House. Now we're hearing from representatives who will be in charge of making laws for our state in the coming years. Senator Marlon Kimpson joining our show. Thank you so much for joining us, Senator.
Thanks for having me.
Obviously, we're just a couple weeks from the legislative session kicking off South Carolina. So we want to talk about some of the goals and aspirations, things that you think might come up during this legislative session this year.
Well, first, let's rehash what we did last year.
Sure.
It's a shame that the bodies, both bodies really, spent as much time as we spent on hot button issues that preoccupied us from getting to the real issues of the people of South Carolina. As you know, we spent a significant amount of time on abortion. And not only in the regular debate, but the issue predominated the budget debate. And so I'm hoping between abortion and banning transsexual or transgender students from high school sports, which, by the way, at best, there were only 5 cases documented in the state of South Carolina. We can finally move on to the people's business. Well, what is the people's business? And I think that's your question. If you look at the pre-files, there are a number of constitutional referendums that senators are asking for the people of South Carolina to decide. One is the use of marijuana for medical purposes. We've seen these referendums all across the country. And unfortunately, our General Assembly has been polarized on the issue. We passed Tom Davis's bill. I was a member of that subcommittee in the Senate, but it got blocked in the House. The other issue that I think you'll see is whether or not we should finally join the majority of states that have had the ability to expand Medicaid. South Carolina ranks one of the lowest poverty indexes in the country. We rank very high when it comes to people who don't have health care. Even Mississippi, and I use Mississippi, we pick on Mississippi in the General Assembly, and other southern states that have similar metrics have recognized that you take free federal money to provide for the care of your citizenry. The other issue that's going to be a referendum sponsored by Senator Darrell Jackson is raising the minimum wage. There are arguments, pros and cons. I am personally for it. The rich have gotten richer, and that includes many in this studio. But the poor have gotten poorer, and the middle class can't find a way without working 2 and 3 jobs to make ends meet. It does not in the states that have passed. There's no great exodus out of the state, despite what the governor and many other Republican legislators say. We need to spend time on the people's business and address raising the minimum wage, the quality of life. Housing is another issue. I got a inclusionary zoning bill. Will be back on the mark this year, and we can talk about that some more.
Senator Kempson, you know, we got about a minute left, so I just want to kind of ask you, what are some of your goals? What are things you want to see happen this year, things that you're maybe hopeful that will happen?
Well, I appreciate the question, and you know, I'm the senator that represents more of Charleston County than anybody else. Right. And so one of the big issues is housing. The average cost of a house in Charleston County now is almost $400,000 and going escalated. We got to find a place for the missing middle to live in downtown Charleston that permeates through working, services. People who work in certain places don't need to live in Orangeburg to work in Charleston County. One of the pet peeves, and this may not sound good to a lot of people, but we got to get these doggone golf carts off major thoroughfares. It's dangerous. We need more golf cart regulation, and I'm going to be fighting for that. And then, of course, safe streets. I live in the Hampton Park area. We're getting too many people injured, particularly during the school times. So we need to have a better comprehensive plan where we work with the city, the county, and DOT to make sure that people can go and come. I'm excited about what Ernest Andrade is doing over at the Charleston Tech Center. Look for Morrison Drive corridor to continue to expand businesses. We got to do something in North Charleston to continue the economic growth and get the gun violence down that's really paralyzing the safety of our citizens.
Senator Kempson, thank you so much for joining us here on To The Point.
Good to be with you.
Good to see you. Thank you.
All right.
Next on News 2.
When we come back, we're hearing from another state lawmaker who's a newcomer in Columbia. In a few minutes, we'll hear from Representative Jordan Pace. State Representative Jordan Pace joining us here on To The Point. Thank you so much for coming in. Appreciate it. You know, Representative Pace, your race was very highly contested or watched by the media, I guess, or people in the area. Crystal Matthews you defeated. So talk to us about this race, how you got here, why this was important to you.
Sure. Yeah, so this was caught a lot of media attention that I didn't expect when I got into the race.
Right.
Due to the fact that my opponent was running in 2 races at the same time, which hopefully after this year, that won't be something that's allowed in South Carolina anymore.
Right.
When I was knocking doors, and I knocked thousands of doors, very grassroots oriented campaign, that was honestly one of the biggest issues that came up when I was discussing the race with folks, when they found out my opponent was running 2 races at the same time, regardless of their political affiliation, whether they agree with other policies or not, they didn't like that. So that made things pretty clear to me as something to tackle. this coming legislative session.
Obviously, Representative Pace, you joined 26 other members who now go into the State House Representatives. A different look this year coming in 2023. So
Right.
talk to us about some of maybe your personal goals, some aspirations, things that you would like to see accomplished in our State House this year.
Sure. Yeah, it's the third largest freshman class of legislators in state history, as far as we can tell. It's the largest since 1996. So there's a whole lot of us. Of varying backgrounds in geography, literally from all over the state. So, as a freshman legislator, historically, you're the low guy on the totem pole. You don't get a whole lot of say. Things are changing though, especially particularly in the committee assignments. So, historically, for the last 30 years, the 3M committee, medical, municipal, and military, was kind of looked at as the timeout corner. Or where freshmen inevitably always go to because nothing ever got done there, and that's changed. In that time period, even though there was a majority of Republicans, it was chaired by a Democrat. Now we have Celeste Davis from Mutts Corner, my neighbor to the north, district-wise, is the new chairwoman of that committee, which we think is probably the first time a Republican's been the chair, and the first time the woman's been the chair of that committee ever in the state history. So we're pretty excited about that. One of the things I'm pretty passionate about and that should come through that committee is the Certificate of Need program. My goal is hopefully to abolish it entirely. If viewers aren't familiar with the Certificate of Need, essentially in South Carolina, if you're a medical provider and you want to build a new facility, expand your facility, and spend more than $600,000 in doing it, or you want to do one of a list of things, MRIs, those scans, surgeries, you not only have to adhere to all the reasonable, cleanliness standards, building standards, that kind of thing. You have to go to DHEC and prove to DHEC that your community needs that service, which is totally backward from the way it's supposed to work in a marketplace where if you think there's customers there, you start your business and provide for those customers. So what that's done in South Carolina is really bottlenecked medical providers who want to serve their community but can't. Legally, they're not allowed to. And what that does on a practical level is drive up costs. So our hope is to get rid of that Soviet-style restriction and open up the marketplace for surgery centers, for imaging centers, things like that to help the cost of medical care go down in South Carolina.
Representative Pace, just quickly, we have a couple seconds remaining here. So, obviously you serve in Columbia, but what do you think are the challenges for your constituents here in the Tri-County area?
Yeah. So my district is the growth district in Berkeley County. It's Karnes, Cane Bay, Nexton, right there in that corridor in Berkeley County where everything's growing. Undoubtedly, it's infrastructure. I don't know if we can cover that in 10 seconds, how to fix the infrastructure, how to fix the roads. Broadly, it's decentralization. Too many decisions are made in Columbia about local roads. And anytime you have over-centralization like that, rather than on the local level, you're going to get slow reaction times. So what we need ultimately, how we get there is the details, the devil's in the details. We need to decentralize those decision-making about road repairs, road expansions to the county level rather than the DOT level.
Representative Pace, thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Appreciate your time. Joined now by newly elected Charleston County Councilman Larry Kabrowski. Larry, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Honor to be here. Thank you.
You have a long record of public service in our state, so I don't know if you want to quickly introduce yourself to our constituents and talk about some of your goals as a county councilman.
I'm Larry Kabrowski. I'm recently elected to represent East Cooper on the Charleston County Council. It goes from McClellanville, Allendaw, the old village of Mount Pleasant along Rifle Range Road, Sullivan's Island, Isle of Palms, and some of the newer subdivisions like Park West and Carolina Park. And this will be a labor of love for me. My wife, Susan, is from McClellanville, and we have been going up there for 40-some years, and I've lived in Sullivan's Island, Isle of Palms, and my children are in Mount Pleasant, the old village, and we have some of the most unique and iconic places that exist anywhere in America, from Bull Island, the Cape Romaine Wildlife Refuge, the Francis Marion Forest, the beaches. So my goal is to preserve what's unique about where we live. I think I went door to door for 2.5 months and met thousands of people that way. And we're at the saturation point. I mean, the infrastructure was not there for all the development. So I think we've reached a point where My goal is to maintain the green spaces and try to put a brake on development, especially from Mount Pleasant to McClellanville, that whole Allendale corridor, because anything that happens there is going to affect us.
Right.
And what's unique is that Charleston County Council has now flipped from Democrat to Republican. I was chairman of the Charleston County Republican Party for 4 years, and obviously most of what county council does is nonpartisan, but there will be differences, I think, on spending priorities and so forth. And we heard Senator Kempson talk about affordable housing, and of course the prices have gone up, but I would also caution that what makes housing affordable or not is your taxes on your home, the ability to pay your mortgage. And a lot of people who have lived here a long time have seen their values go up a lot, but doesn't necessarily mean that your income has gone up to pay it. And if people come here from other places and kind of the prices have gone up, it jeopardizes your ability. People love living in East Cooper and they want to stay there. So my goal would be to be a fiscal conservative and watch every penny. And I would approach county council with a sense of awe, because you're spending other people's money. And taxes, it's not free money, it's money that people have to then not use for other purposes. So I'm very concerned about that and not drive people out of their homes. And what also keeps me up at night is hurricane evacuation. I remember in Hugo, I met my father-in-law from McClellanville on Highway 41. And this pulled over on the side of the road, and that was rural at the time. And now it makes me shudder to think how we're going to evacuate. So in terms of the amount of people that live East Cooper, it's also a matter of safety. I think we've reached a saturation point, and no, we shouldn't develop more until we have infrastructure and roads that can meet that. I think we got ahead of ourselves.
Mr. Grabowski, we have about a minute left. So,
Okay.
Obviously you've talked about challenges being housing, and we talk about infrastructure. I mean, how do we tackle some of these challenges that are facing Charleston County residents right now?
Well, we can't undo the development that's happened, but I think we have to not let more development and make things worse. So you have to put a brake on things and try to let the infrastructure catch up with the development, because we certainly, developers got, they plan decades ahead,
right,
and the people that live here have no say in that. So we have to kind of put a brake and make sure that they don't develop all of Allendale and make things much worse for McClellanville and Mount Pleasant. But if I have time, I was on the State Board of Education for 8 years altogether. I had been on the Charleston County School District, so it's kind of my segueing from public education now to the county council. But I'd like to, if I can, about what I've seen in education, the arc of things over that time period. I started out as a liberal Democrat before I got on the Charleston County School Board, and became a conservative Republican because of public education. I grew up thinking public education was the best thing about America. And I remember sitting with my grandfather, who was a first generation American, his report card from 1906, and this how things, he grew up in a home where English wasn't spoken. It was the poorest part of town, and only went to the 6th grade because nobody went after that, because you had to go to work in the mines, the factories, or building homes. And he was able, and all the other people, his generation that went to public school after 6 years, were more literate in many ways than people that graduate high school now. And I just wanted to share this of what they were graded on it. And this is his report card from 6th grade, and it was graded from 0 to 5. 0 meaning complete failure, 5 meaning you're doing well, and you needed a composite grade of 4 to be graduated, because it meant that you knew what you were doing. And they graded you on spelling, reading, grammar, geography, mental arithmetic, written arithmetic, penmanship, composition, declamation, and most important, conduct, neatness, and industry, because those are the things, and it actually said that what makes a scholar do well in school will make them do well out in the world. And I wanted to say that with education now, this is a much more simple, direct thing of what you need to know, and they no longer grade conduct and effort. And I think that's because in any education, no amount of money has been spent like the present education with less results.
Right.
Because I think that you only get out of life or work or education proportion to the effort you put into it, and it's internal out. And I think that what I've seen, they think if they make it easy enough or culturally close enough to the students, it comes from the outside, but it always comes from the inside, what you do in life or in education. So I think they kind of have it backwards. And I've always tried, the one regret I have on Charleston County Council and the State Board, I never can get them to reinstitute grades for effort and conduct commensurate with the academic subjects. I feel those would be just as important, because you can imagine going to school for 12 years, K to 12, and having the teacher always being to grade you and knowing that your effort and conduct is just as important, I think would make better citizens and learn more. They've made it easier to graduate in the past with negative results. I mean, it always should be an effort, something that you achieve, rather than just try to make it easier so it doesn't matter anymore. So thanks for letting me
of course.
Pontificate on that.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Grabowski, thank you so much for your
you.
time. You'll
Thank
take
you.
office at the beginning of January. Certainly looking
I
forward
will.
to that.
Thank you. Take care.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Next on News 2.
When we come back, we're learning more about the controversy surrounding the Berkeley County School Board. We'll tell you about the fireworks that happened this week's school board meeting. We go now to developing news out of Berkeley County as heated discussions continue between Berkeley County School Board members, teachers, retired teachers, and people who live in Berkeley County, voicing opinions about the board's decision last month to fire Superintendent Deion Jackson. Things got heated during last week's board meeting, where the former board chair, David Barrow, questioned new leadership about recent hiring practices. Take a listen.
Is this a witch hunt on your part to try to denigrate me?
I'm just saying, I've got a list of about...
No, I'm not going to tolerate it.
I'm just saying, you're complaining about the hiring practice because they weren't
And
advertised.
they are factual. You are not factual.
Are you going to let me finish, or are you going to
Yeah,
interrupt?
absolutely.
Okay, what I was saying is, you're complaining that the position wasn't advertised. I got a list here of about 6 positions that weren't advertised when you were chairperson. So
Okay, so you're saying I was
It's
chairperson
a
when Ms.
two-way
Tanner,
street.
when Ms. Tanner was hired? That's a bald-faced lie.
John, we bring you back in. Obviously, this has been an ongoing issue in Berkeley County ever since the election. You hear Mac McQuillan, the new chairman there. You hear former chairman, Mr. Barrow. A lot of controversy. Break this down quickly for us.
So this is certainly a developing story, to say the least. We know that Superintendent Jackson has filed, or former Superintendent Jackson has filed a lawsuit alleging some illegal activity. This will continue to play out. At the end of the day, for voters, though, your vote matters. And if you did not vote for these individuals and you're concerned about what is going on right now, then you need to get out, run yourself, or recruit someone else to run. But at the end of the day, elections matter, and we'll see if the board was in fact within their rights to terminate the superintendent's agreement.
You know, John, obviously we're not legal experts, but how could this play out quickly in the future here for this district?
Well, so again, it certainly begins to raise some additional questions, and whether whether it was some sort of illegal activity preceding the firing of the former superintendent, we just don't quite know yet. But at the end of the day, if you're an elected official, what you do matters, and you need to be mindful that people are always watching.
John, I think that's a wrap on 2022 for us. We're going to take a couple weeks off. We'll be back in the next year. But thank you so much for watching To The Point this year as the show we've launched. We feel pretty good about it, and we're going to have some exciting guests coming up in 2023 as we head towards the presidential run. Thank you so much for joining us here on To The Point. We'll see you here in 2 weeks. Have a great Merry Christmas, a great New Year, and a great Sunday.